Once upon a time, in the woods just down the road, there lived a family of bears. They were happy and kind, and they were the type of bears to always try to see the best in everyone. If someone was rude to them, they would say, "That's okay, maybe they're having a bad day. We've all had one of those." Or if someone pushed in front of them at the shops, they would say, "That's okay, maybe there's been an emergency and they're in a terrible hurry." Always kind, always generous, and loved by everyone in the woods. They lived in a sweet cottage, just the three of them. Papa Bear and Mama Bear were carpenters, and they fashioned the house and everything in it to be just perfect for their little family. All of the furniture was made to measure for each of them, and every day when they came home and sat in their chairs or lay in their beds, they would heave a huge sigh of relief and think how lucky they were to have such a perfectly comfortable home. One sunny morning, Mama Bear made 3 delicious bowls of porridge in each of their special bowls. A small wooden bowl for Baby Bear, a medium-sized, pretty blue and white china bowl for Mama Bear, and a large tin bowl for Papa Bear. But when they came to eat their porridge, it was far too hot and nearly burned their mouths. They decided to go for a gentle stroll in the morning sunshine, so they put on their hats and stepped out into the woods. Not far away lived a little girl named Goldilocks. She was an obnoxious little oik. That means she was unpleasant, rude, and selfish, and she didn't care at all who she put out or offended. She was an all-round nasty little wretch, and all those who met her considered her to be generally bad news. Goldilocks happened to be strolling through the woods on this lovely sunny morning too. She'd been sent outside by her mother for refusing to help with the washing up. Straight away, she smelled the delicious porridge smell wafting through the air, and she followed it to the bear's cottage. And then Goldilocks just let herself in, with no concern for what sort of trouble it might get her in. She was pleased to see no one was home and strolled right into the kitchen without even taking her muddy boots off. She plonked herself down at the table and took a great big steaming spoonful of Mama Bear's bowl of porridge. "Yuck!" she declared rudely. "Too sweet!" and spat the porridge back into the bowl. Disgusting behaviour. She took a huge mouthful from Papa Bear's bowl. "Yuck!" She scrunched up her horrid little face. "Too salty!" and spat the porridge back into the bowl. She took a great big heaping spoonful from Baby Bear's bowl. "Mmm," she said. "Just right." And she scoffed the lot, the greedy thing, even licking the bowl. When her belly was full, she fancied a little sit down and swaggered through to the living room. There, she found the 3 bears' chairs. Goldilocks tried Papa Bear's chair first. "Too hard," she said, and jumped off the chair, knocking it backwards onto the floor. She tried Baby Bear's chair next, and as she flopped down onto the chair, it broke and went crashing to the ground. "Ugh!" she cried. "What a horrible little chair!" Finally, she tried Mama Bear's chair. It was perfectly comfortable, and it was a very pretty pink colour with buttery soft blankets thrown over the back. Goldilocks made herself right at home, picking her snotty little nose and wiping it on the arm of the chair. What a horrid little girl. She felt a little bored and decided to head upstairs for a rest. She clomped up the stairs, leaving a trail of mud behind her. She lay down on Papa Bear's neatly made bed first. She couldn't get comfortable, and she tossed and turned until it was all messed up and muddy from her boots, which she still hadn't bothered to take off. Eventually, she rolled out of that bed. "Too hard," she said, and moved on to Mama Bear's bed. She flopped down onto it and nearly disappeared amongst all the cushions and soft blankets. "Ah!" she cried, and tried to wrestle her way back to solid ground again. "Too soft," she said, yet again, leaving a muddy trail behind her. Lastly, she fell into Baby Bear's bed. She thought. If she were perfectly honest with herself, it was a little cramped, but it was the most comfortable of the 3, and she was rather tired, so she rolled over and went to sleep without another thought. Just then, the sweet, kind bear family returned from their walk, hungry and eager to eat their breakfast. They'd been thinking about their delicious steaming hot bowls of porridge since they left, and they were very excited. Straight away they noticed that something was wrong.
"Somebody's been eating my porridge,"
said Papa Bear. "Somebody's been eating mine too," said Mama Bear. "Somebody's eaten all of my porridge," said Baby Bear. The bear family looked at each other, and even though they were very upset and really rather hungry, they decided to think kind thoughts. This is very difficult, especially with empty tummies. Perhaps the person who ate our porridge was lost and scared and starving. We should think the best of them, they said. They decided to go and sit down and try to enjoy what was left of the morning, but when they saw their chairs, they were even more concerned.
"Someone has knocked over my chair,"
said Papa Bear. "Someone has broken my chair altogether," said Baby Bear. "There is snot on my beautiful chair," said Mama Bear. The bears looked at each other and tried very, very hard to think kind thoughts, although this was becoming increasingly difficult. They were starting to feel little prickles of annoyance at their mysterious guest. Perhaps the person was unwell, they tried. Maybe they sneezed so hard that Papa Bear's chair fell and broke Baby Bear's chair, and perhaps some sneeze accidentally got onto Mama's chair. It sounded pretty far-fetched, but they really were doing their best. That's when they saw the trail of mud going up the stairs. They followed the trail, wondering what on earth they would find next.
"Someone has messed up my bed,"
said Papa Bear, feeling very cross. "Someone has messed up my bed," said Mama Bear, feeling even more cross. "Someone is literally still asleep in my bed," cried Baby Bear, feeling the most cross of them all. Just then, Goldilocks opened her eyes and let out a huge yawn. The bears looked at her, waiting to hear what possible explanation she could have. She took one look at the bears and said, "Ugh! What are you all staring at, smelly old weirdos?" The bears could hold it in no longer. They had tried and tried and tried to see the best in Goldilocks, but it seemed to them that there just wasn't any good in her at all. Their crossness built up inside them until it exploded out in a gigantic and ferocious roar. In a heartbeat, Goldilocks jumped from the bed, ran down the stairs and bolted out of the door and into the woods. Goldilocks went straight home to her mother and started frantically washing up as fast as she could. Her mother never knew why, but Goldilocks seemed to be a lot more pleasant and helpful from that day on. And the three bears made sure to always, always lock their door when they went for a stroll. The Three Billy Goats Gruff. Once upon a time, far away from here, in a little valley nestled between two hills, there were three goats. They were brothers, and everyone knew them as the Three Billy Goats Gruff. Their names were Little Billy Goat Gruff, Middle Billy Goat Gruff, and Big Billy Goat Gruff. They had a simple and happy life. They spent their days frolicking in the meadow, munching on the sweet green grass, and playing by the crystal clear river that separated the two sides of the valley. The valley was beautiful, and they were very happy there. But as time went by, they realised that they had a big problem. The sweet green grass that they loved so much was almost gone on their side of the valley. The goats had eaten nearly all of it, and their meadow was starting to look patchy and bare. One day, Little Billy Goat Gruff looked up from munching on his grassy breakfast, and he saw that the meadow across the river was filled with thick, juicy green grass.
"Brothers," he said, "have you ever noticed how absolutely delicious that grass looks over there?"
Middle Billy Goat Gruff said, "Wowzers, I've never seen such scrumptious-looking grass. But, little brother, there's one big problem. We have to cross the river, and we can't swim."
"What about that?"
said Little Billy Goat Gruff, pointing at a nearby wooden bridge.
"No one crosses the bridge,"
said Big Billy Goat Gruff.
"There is a troll under there, and he's big and mean, and he eats goats like us for breakfast."
His brothers gasped.
And he's smelly too,
Big Billy Goat Gruff added, and his brothers gasped again. Big Billy Goat Gruff was absolutely right. The troll was big, and he was mean, and he did eat goats for breakfast. His skin was green and warty, his teeth yellow and crooked, and his nose was spotty and snotty. He was grumpy and lumpy, and what he hated more than anything was the thought of anyone crossing over his bridge.
all I want is a bit of peace and quiet, the troll would say. Is that so much to ask?
He just happened to think that goats were the most delicious thing in the whole wide world, and that made him extra dangerous. But the 3 billy goats Gruff were fast running out of food in their meadow, and they were starting to get rumbly tummies. They needed a plan. They put their heads together and they thought hard about what they could do.
We could sail across,
Little Billy Goat Gruff suggested.
We don't have a boat.
Middle Billy Goat Gruff said.
Could we try sneaking over the bridge at night?
Little Billy Goat Gruff said.
Our feet would make too much noise on the wooden planks,
Middle Billy Goat Gruff replied.
The troll would hear us with his great big ears and gobble us right up. What if we built another bridge?
Little Billy Goat Gruff said.
We're goats, Big Billy Goat Gruff said. We can't build anything.
Good point,
Little Billy Goat Gruff said. They kept thinking until they came up with the perfect plan. The next day, Little Billy Goat Gruff trotted up to the bridge. His hooves made a trip-trap sound as he stepped onto the wooden planks. No sooner had he set his foot on the bridge, the troll jumped up from underneath it to block his path.
Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?
Roared the troll, his horrible voice echoing through the valley.
Nothing to worry about,
Little Billy Goat Gruff said as bravely as he could.
It's only me, Little Billy Goat Gruff. I'm just popping over to the other side.
I don't think so. I'm gonna gobble you up,
bellowed the troll, licking his lips.
Well, you could,
said Little Billy Goat Gruff.
But I don't think I'd make a very good meal. I'm much too tiny.
The troll looked confused. He got confused quite a lot. Then the Little Billy Goat Gruff continued.
Why don't you wait for my brother, Middle Billy Goat Gruff? He's much bigger and tastier than me.
The troll thought for a moment and then stepped aside, smiling.
Very well, he said, but hurry up and get off my bridge, he added with a snarl.
And with that, Little Billy Goat Gruff scampered across the bridge and began to munch on the delicious green grass on the other side. Next, it was Middle Billy Goat Gruff's turn to cross the bridge. His hooves made a louder trip-trap sound as he stepped onto the wooden planks. Again, the troll appeared.
Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?
Roared the troll.
It's only me, Middle Billy Goat Gruff. No big deal,
said the goat in his medium-sized voice, trying to be brave.
I'm just popping over to the other side to join my brother.
I do not think so. I'm gonna gobble you up,
bellowed the troll, showing his horrible yellow teeth.
Well, you could,
said Middle Billy Goat Gruff.
But the thing is, I'm not that big, and I wouldn't be a very good meal, especially for someone as big and strong as you. Wait for my brother, Big Billy Goat Gruff. Now he would fill you up, that's for sure.
The troll licked his lips and stepped aside to let the goat pass.
Very well, he said. Now hurry up and get off my bridge.
Middle Billy Goat Gruff trotted across the bridge and joined his little brother on the other side and began munching through the lush, juicy grass. Finally, it was Big Billy Goat Gruff's turn to cross the bridge. His hooves made a very loud trip-trap sound as he stepped onto the wooden planks. The troll, expecting a big meal, jumped up immediately.
Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?
Roared the troll, his mouth watering.
It's me, Big Billy Goat Gruff,
said the goat in his biggest, deepest voice.
At last, said the troll. I've been waiting for you, Big Billy Goat Gruff. You look very big and very delicious, and I simply can't wait to gobble you up.
The troll bared his horrible yellow teeth. Big Billy Goat Gruff was not scared of the troll. He had big, strong horns, and he was mighty brave.
Bring it on, you spotty, snotty, lumpy, grumpy beast, he said boldly.
The troll was a bit taken aback. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, but he was also very hungry, and he decided to take Big Billy Goat Gruff on. The troll lunged at Big Billy Goat Gruff, but the big goat was ready. He lowered his head, pointed his horns at the troll, and charged. He butted into the troll with such enormous force that the troll was thrown backwards off the bridge and into the river, floating away downstream, never to be seen in the valley again. With the troll gone, Big Billy Goat Gruff skipped lightly across the bridge and joined his brothers in the lush green meadow. The three goats were over the moon to be back together again and to finally be in the beautiful green meadow, eating the luscious, scrumptious and plentiful grass. They spent the rest of their days happily grazing and frolicking in their new home. And with the troll finally gone, they could cross the bridge whenever they wanted without any fear. And they lived happily ever after. What about the troll, I hear you ask? Well, a lot of people don't know this, but he floated down the river, away from the valley and out to sea. After weeks of floating about, he eventually washed up on a desert island, a quiet and peaceful place with absolutely no one else around. It was paradise for the troll. He found that coconuts were even more delicious than goats, and he spent the rest of his days guarding his beautiful island home, which was easy because no one ever found it. He may even be there still. The Gingerbread Man. Once upon a time there was an old woman. Her husband was gone, and her children were all grown up with families of their own, and so the old woman lived alone, apart from her chickens, of course, and she was desperately lonely. One day, to cheer herself up, she decided to make some gingerbread. She carefully measured the ingredients and moulded the dough lovingly into the shape of a little man, and once he was baked, she decorated him with icing and sweeties so that he had a smiling mouth and smart buttons down his front. He looked very nice. The old woman looked at him and thought, he looks almost too good to eat. Nonetheless, she picked him up and raised him to her lips to take a bite, when suddenly he yelled,
"Old woman, what are you doing?"
She dropped the gingerbread man in surprise, and he scurried out the door, laughing and shouting,
"Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man."
The gingerbread man ran down the garden path on his little gingerbread legs, faster than you would think a small biscuit could run. Suddenly, the old woman's chickens were hot on his heels, squawking and pecking at him. He yelped in surprise and ran even faster, jumping over the garden gate in one giant leap, leaving the chickens behind, clucking indignantly. He cackled to himself and called,
"Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man."
He ran down the lane and turned the corner, and there, in front of him, was a cat, fluffy and white, a blue collar around her neck, and a little silver bell tinkling softly against her chest. The cat's face was scrunched up into a permanent scowl, and she hissed at the gingerbread man before giving chase. The gingerbread man yelped and quickened his pace. Usually, cats are quite fast. By rights, the gingerbread man shouldn't have stood a chance, but this particular cat could usually be found curled up on a warm lap, or eating smoked salmon pâté and cream. So she was actually quite slow, and she ran out of puff rather quickly. The gingerbread man outpaced her and left her panting on the side of the road. He laughed a mocking laugh and called out,
"Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the Gingerbread Man."
Soon he came to a field that ran alongside a riverbank where all was quiet, and he decided to rest a while. The river was wide and slow, flowing lazily past, dragonflies and water boatmen making little ripples on the surface. But no matter how gentle the current was, the gingerbread man could not swim, and he knew that if he got wet, he would dissolve away into the river and be gone forever. Just as he was pondering what he should do, a shadow fell over him. The gingerbread man looked up, and there was a huge brown cow standing over him, licking her lips. The gingerbread man froze, his mouth gaping open in fear, and the cow leaned down towards him, her big pink tongue curling out of her mouth, ready to snap him up. The gingerbread man finally found his feet, and he ran off down the riverbank. The cow gave chase, and the gingerbread man was horrified to find that she was actually quite fast. He looked this way and that for an escape, but it was the field or the river, and either way he was doomed. Up ahead, he saw a fox taking a drink from the river.
Fox!
The gingerbread man called out. The fox looked up from the river and cocked his head. This was something new. He'd been around a while, this fox, and he thought he'd seen everything. But a biscuit come to life being chased by a farm animal. He'd never seen anything like this before.
Fox! Help me across the river!
The gingerbread man demanded as he came hurtling towards the fox, the cow in close pursuit. What's in it for me? The sly old fox called back.
Just help me!
The gingerbread man pleaded. The fox took pity on the poor gingerbread man. No one wants to be eaten by a cow. Hop on, he said, and the gingerbread man took a leap of faith onto the fox's back, and the fox slid right into the river, leaving the cow skidding to a halt on the bank.
Ha ha!
The gingerbread man shouted at the cow, jumping up and down on the fox's back.
Run, run as fast as you can! You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man!
The fox suddenly didn't feel so sorry for the gingerbread man, and the sweet smell of ginger, sugar and icing tickled his nose. As he swam across the river, he let his back sink a little lower into the water.
Fox!
The gingerbread man warned.
My toes are getting wet!
Oh dear, the fox said. Perhaps you should seek higher ground. Try my neck. The gingerbread man climbed up onto the fox's neck, but soon this seemed to be sinking lower into the water too.
Fox!
The gingerbread man panicked.
It's happening again! I'm going to be soaked soon!
Oh dear, the fox said again. Why don't you try my head? They were so very nearly at the other side of the river, but the gingerbread man did as the fox suggested. Without warning, the fox flicked up his head, sending the gingerbread man flying through the air, soaring higher and higher into the sky, and then tumbling, tumbling, tumbling back down towards the fox's open jaws.
Fox!
The gingerbread man shouted.
You betrayed me!
But there was nothing he could do to slow his descent. He shouted,
I should never have been so cocky and rude! This is what I get!
Suddenly, a wrinkled old hand reached out and snatched him from the air. It was the old woman. She had been worried about him and had followed him all this way. You've been very naughty, she scolded him, holding him up to her face.
I know,
he said, hanging his head.
I'm sorry.
She said, looking him up and down. Well, shall we go home? If you promise to be good, I promise not to eat you.
Yes, please,
he said. And so the old woman and the gingerbread man went back to the cottage together. The gingerbread man was mostly very good, and the old woman was no longer lonely, and they lived happily ever after. The Ugly Duckling. There was once a mother duck. She had laid a little pile of perfect blue-green eggs in her nest, and she sat on them, patiently, lovingly, for exactly 28 days, checking them and turning them just right so they would all hatch into perfect, healthy ducklings. After exactly the right amount of time, the eggs started to shake and wobble, and slowly they began to crack. First, smooth, dainty little beaks appeared, and then cute little yellow faces. And finally, fluffy little bodies emerged from the eggshells, and the tiny little baby ducklings started cheeping adorably at their mother. But there was one egg left. It was bigger than the rest, with a dull grey colour. While the cute little ducklings all shook their little tails and started getting to know each other, the last egg just lay there. It didn't move. The mother duck was very sad. Even though she knew that not all eggs hatch, she felt sure she'd done everything right for her eggs, and she couldn't understand why this one was taking so long. But she was a good mother, and she carried on warming the egg and turning it carefully with her beak, until finally, after 8 more days, the egg finally wobbled and cracked. The crack revealed a long black beak, a dull grey face, and a clumsy and awkward body. The ugly duckling tried to cheep cutely at its mother, but only an unpleasant hissing honk came out, and all its fluffy yellow brothers and sisters laughed. The mother duck shushed the naughty ducklings and told them not to be unkind. She nuzzled her new baby and kept him tightly under her wing to keep him warm and safe and show him that he was loved and wanted. He quickly became stronger and bigger than all of his siblings, even though they were older than him. After a few days, he was ready to swim with his mother and leaped into the pond with great enthusiasm and excitement. The water felt wonderfully cool on his scrawny black legs, and he dived and splashed to his heart's content. His brothers and sisters watched from the pond's edge. They didn't feel ready to swim just yet, and they became even more hateful of the ugly duckling. They didn't like how closely their mother kept him, and now they didn't like that he was showing them up with his swimming skills either. They decided he would have to go. So one evening, while the mother duck was out finding some juicy slugs for their dinner, they crowded round the ugly duckling and pushed him cruelly out of the nest.
"We don't want you here. You don't belong with us," they said.
The ugly duckling was heartbroken, but he knew deep down that he was different somehow. So he left the nest, the pond, and his beloved mother duck, and went out to find his own way in the world. He padded his way across the moonlit farm to a river, where he slid into the gentle current and drifted away. After a short while, the ugly duckling felt something cold and slippery touch his webbed foot. He felt suddenly very small and very alone on the river. It touched him again, and he started to paddle faster, and then he felt something very sharp clamp down on his foot. He screamed and flapped his stubby little wings and kicked his feet to get away. He shook the thing off and made it to the riverbank to see the pike dive back down under the black water, its sharp teeth glinting in the moonlight. The ugly duckling wondered if perhaps the river wasn't the safest place for such a little thing. He waddled along down the riverbank a little further. From the corner of his eye, he saw a flash of orange and heard the gnashing of jaws, and suddenly a fox was upon him, trying to gobble him up. He leapt back into the river, thinking to take his chances with the pike again, and the fox slunk away. The rest of the night was spent between the river and the bank, avoiding rats, otters, and even an enormous owl who swooped down to try and snatch him up in her claws. When the sun finally came up, the ugly duckling was exhausted. As he paddled down the river, he saw a little cottage with a neat little vegetable garden and a rickety wooden shed. The door was slightly open, and so he quickly went inside. It was warm and safe in the shed, and the garden was full of delicious, juicy slugs. The ugly duckling made himself a shaggy little nest out of bits and bobs he found in the shed, and decided to stay a while. The little old lady from the cottage found him there, but instead of shooing him away, she laid a handful of fresh peas from her garden by his nest and let him be. She was glad of the help with the slugs, and he was no bother, even if he was rather unsightly. The ugly duckling stayed there in the shed all winter, occasionally taking quick dips in the river to wash, but never stayed in the water long enough to really enjoy himself, for fear of the riverbank creatures who might have him for lunch. As spring started to brighten the garden, the ugly duckling found that his little nest had become rather too small, and he was finding it very difficult to squeeze through the gap in the doorway of the shed. The little old lady could tell it was time for him to go. She gave him one last handful of peas and stroked his head and waved him off as he stepped into the river. He didn't want to go, but something in his heart told him he had to move on. He paddled down the river bravely and was surprised that the other creatures on the riverbank seemed to give him a wide berth. He came to a lovely wide part of the river, where the water was calm and still, and there before him he could see what seemed like 1,000 beautiful white birds with long, elegant necks and huge, graceful wings. They filled the water and the sky like snowy confetti, and he'd never seen anything so wonderful. Worried that they would laugh at his ugly appearance, the ugly duckling kept his head low and paddled on, eager to get through without being mocked and teased, but desperate to stay longer to watch the lovely birds. He noticed that as he swam through the birds, they seemed to be stopping to look at him and turned to track his progress down the river. He paddled harder, worried that the jeers and laughter would soon start, but instead he could swear that one dipped its head in a gesture of respect. The ugly duckling lifted his head and couldn't believe it when the birds met his eye and smiled. Not a pitying or sympathetic smile, but hopeful and friendly smiles. Why weren't they laughing at him? He slowed his paddling and let the ripples of water go still around him. The current of the river was so slow and still there, it was like glass. The ugly duckling looked down at his reflection and froze. Gone was his long black beak. Gone was his dull grey face, and gone was his clumsy, awkward body. In its place was a smooth white body, powerful white wings, and a slender curving white neck leading to a handsome black and orange beak. The ugly duckling smiled. He had grown into the most magnificent swan. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this magical story. If you want to come along on more of our adventures, make sure you subscribe to our channel. There's so much more to be discovered. You can start right now by clicking on our channel and picking your next favourite tale. There really is something for everyone, from daring heroes and mischievous creatures to magical lands and secret wonders. And remember, by subscribing, you'll be the first to know when a brand new story is ready to be enjoyed. Let's go.